So namaste and welcome to Satsang tonight. So this evening I wanted to do some guided exploration into the nature of our real self, because it's always really, really helpful to begin to have an experience of what you actually are. And once we've had that experience, every time we look after that and experience it, we're going to experience it on a deeper level, see more clearly, and just come to a greater understanding. And literally, that seeing of what we are is already beginning to undo all of the things that we thought we were, all of the ways that we are living as a separate being, all of the ways that we are still embodying in our life, our mind, our body, the limited aspect of our being. So to see what we are is going to begin to shift you. It's going to begin to destroy thoughts, your ability to believe thoughts that say things like you're never gonna get there, you're never gonna experience it, you're never gonna be able to be where the sages were, and all of that. So with that, I'd like to invite you into an experience of what you actually are with me. And to do that, I'd like you to, if you want to follow along with what I'm suggesting, and with your eyes open if possible, so that we don't drift off into a nice state just yet. We can do that later on, but to start with your eyes open and really just to pick some in the room that you're sitting in, just like you to pick any object at all. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. Just to pick one object, and as you look at it with your eyes, noticing that your eyes are focused on that object. And then without moving your eyes away from the object, so we're not staring hard at it, we're just gazing at any particular object. It can be anything from your phone or your device to your cat or anything at all. And as you're looking at it, just asking you now to become aware of the space around it. So even while you're still looking at it, you can kind of notice that there is some space around that object in particular. So right now I'm looking at my laptop that I'm broadcasting this on with my eyes, and then I've got awareness of the space around the laptop. So just asking you now to spread that, noticing outwards that there is a room that you're sitting in. Again, with your eyes, you can keep your eyes on the object or you can move them around. It's entirely up to you. And we're not like doing a staring contest. You can just blink normally. So when we focus upon a thought, it's kind of like looking at a particular object. But we do have the ability as human beings also to focus on the space around something. So even while your eyes were looking at a particular object, you were able to be aware of the space around that particular object. So right there is a really important thing for you to recognize, that you already have the capacity to notice something that has no shape, that has no form. And if we then apply this to our own particular pathway, if I ask you the question right now, are you aware? And you notice how there is an inner looking and seeing. So to ask that question, and to answer that question rather, there has to be a looking and a seeing inside if you are aware right now. So you can only see what your eyes are telling you and hear these words because there is awareness. Your eyes and your ears are reporting to something that's watching, that's noticing. Something understands these words. But when you answer that question inside, the looking and the seeing, the recognition of awareness, awareness being present, then it's a kind of subjective focusing. So we have two abilities as a human being. We can either pay attention to something, an object, or we can pay attention to that which isn't a thing, like awareness itself. So you automatically did that, maybe without even realizing, to answer this question. Am I aware right now? Is there awareness present? To answer that question, your attention has to let go of looking at something in particular, such as thoughts or emotions, and open up to see if awareness is present. And it recognizes awareness is present. And awareness isn't a thing, it isn't an object. So right there is awareness recognizing itself. And notice how effortlessly you can move from looking at a particular object to noticing the space around an object, from listening to these words to recognizing awareness. It's effortless for you to shift. You already have this ability, it's already present within you to recognize something which has no shape. And you can do this with any of the practices that are in the Dissolving the Ego book, or any particular way of recognizing the real self. If I ask you right now to listen to the silence, and then when we hear the silence, we're hearing it, we're paying attention to it. There's awareness of silence, but where is that silence? What is it? And again, it's easily noticeable that silence isn't an object. It's here, but it's not a particular shape. Nobody can really say where silence is or isn't, except the fact it's present. Even if we notice a sense of beingness, something here that just is, that is you, where in particular are you looking to recognize that? The sense of existence, the sense of presence. We recognize that presence that is you. How are you recognizing it? So if you're looking and seeing and answering these questions, following them inside yourself, you see that you already have two modes of perception and that you're effortlessly switching between the two. If I ask you to look at any object in the room right now, put your attention on a particular object for a few seconds, then you notice that your awareness has the ability to zoom in to look at one particular thing. And if you look at your hand, you can focus, your eyes are focusing on an object. Then if I ask you, are you aware? Immediately to answer that question, awareness kind of opens up again and recognizes the subjective awareness, the not a thingness that you really are. It doesn't have any shape or form. And it doesn't matter whether we call it stillness, noumenon, self, silence, awareness, presence, being, consciousness. If we ask you right now, are you conscious? Most of you hopefully would agree that you are. But recognizing that, how do you know that you're conscious? There is something here that we're calling consciousness, which is not a thing at all. What we are conscious of are thoughts, our emotions, our world, our relationships, our experiences. Those are things, those are objects, phenomena. But it is already effortless for you to switch between these two modes and becoming increasingly so. So right now you can perceive form and formless very easily. Even to notice the empty space in the room that you're in, and then the space that the room is appearing in, this moment in which the room and your body and these words coming through, whatever you're watching this on, it's all being recognized effortlessly. So even that you can notice both of these at once. There's awareness and there's also the things I'm aware of at the same time appearing. So why is this so important to recognize? Because why spend this time to notice these faculties that we have already? It's really because as human beings we tend to overlook the obvious. We're always looking for some amazing experience that we would call awakening, when really it's a recognition of what's always been present. Already right now you have the ability to be aware of something, and when we look at some object, either an internal object of thoughts or experiences, emotions, we call that attention. My attention drifted to thoughts, my attention is on the noises outside that are passing by. And when we look at the subjective awareness, the not a thingness that we are, the formlessness, we call that awareness. This is really a recognition that awareness and attention are the same thing inherently. Silence and what silence is listening to, how it's listening to. It can listen to thoughts, which are objects, silence, or it can listen to itself, which is not a thing, not an object. So rather than looking for some big seeing or some final recognition, maybe the same experience that all awakened beings have is what you're having right now, and maybe haven't quite actually recognized the significance of it. Every awakened being that's fully realized, that's ever walked this planet, has done the same thing that you've just done, recognized that they have the ability already to notice that which is not a thing. That awareness can look at something, or it can look at no thing. That the silence can recognize objects or the subjective self. And the only difference between perhaps us right now and those great sages is that they spent some time bringing attention back, bringing awareness back to this not a thingness, this formless consciousness, presence, beingness that you are. So much so that they forgot how to pay attention to something, forgot how to pay attention to thoughts. Could it be just a simple habit to recognize the subjectivity that you are, the subjective experiencing with no body experiencing, awareness just watching? Could it be that simple, that to pay attention to this, where attention kind of rests back in its source, which is the awareness? That at some point doing that, bringing awareness back to look at itself, at some point when we've done this consistently, somehow awareness loses its capacity to contract around a thought or an emotion or an experience. Could it be that that's the only habit they've really cultivated? Why does this benefit us to know? Because the next time, imagine the next time a thought arose in your mind, you could not actually pay attention to it. Can you imagine if next time an emotion arose in your body, you literally couldn't zoom in and contract around it? It was just allowed to be present inside your own subjectivity. It was just allowed to be felt and dissipated in the body. What do you think your experience would be like if you couldn't pay attention to thoughts anymore, if they were just coming and you'd somehow lost that ability to contract back around them with your attention? Because when we do that, then we experience that thought. That's what believing a thought actually is. It's automatic, compulsive, not a choice, contracting around this thought and really, really paying a lot of attention to it, and then experiencing it as if it's real, if it's true. So by recognizing that you already have the same capacity as the sages, as the awakened beings, hopefully I want to destroy within you this capacity to think that it's not going to happen for you, or that there's some special trick that we have to somehow recognize, or something that we have to learn to do. But already you've hopefully seen tonight several times now that to listen to the silence, to recognize awareness, to know that you're conscious, or even the sense that I am, or the sense of existence. You know you exist. Something about you is just existing. But when you look for where that sense of existence is, can't really say an exact location. We can't pinpoint it on a map. There isn't an object called me that is existing, living in the body. What we are aware of are objects, but the one that is aware is not an object, not a something or a someone. So just to bring attention back to its source, it opens up to do that, to even answer the question, am I aware? There's a looking and a recognition of awareness in that moment. If we slow down and notice what happens, there's a looking and a seeing, and the subjective nothingness, the formlessness that you are, recognizes itself in that moment. It doesn't feel special, doesn't feel amazing, but it is the foundation of awakening right there. The fact that you're already able to recognize that which doesn't have any form, doesn't have any shape, doesn't have any color, doesn't have any tangible quality at all, doesn't smell like anything, doesn't taste like anything. It's got no defining characteristics at all. So you can prove it to yourself again. You can ask that question, am I aware? Am I conscious right now? In answering that question, there is a looking and a seeing. The seeing is recognizing itself in that moment. This big moment that our mind perhaps has projected, that at some point there will be this massive seeing, this apocalyptic firework moment where I recognize what I am. It's just happened right there, and we may have just gone right past it. We may have not noticed how amazing it is. What does this mean? Why am I stressing this right now? Because what is the reason for recognizing this? So I want you to be able to see that there is no difference between you and me right now. Only difference is I've been recognizing this longer, so that it's become a habit. It's become effortless for awareness to be watching itself. And there aren't even two awarenesses when we look. If we notice that we're aware right now, there's awareness present right now. And there must be, for you to hear these words, to understand what they mean, to see the images, to recognize the images that your eyes are seeing, must be present right now. And when we look for ourselves in that awareness, is there somebody being aware? Or is there just awareness when we look? Is there anyone listening to the silence? Or is there just silence when we actually look and see? Is there anyone resting in the stillness? Or is there just stillness? The only way that you can notice this non-phenomenal, this formless awareness that you are, that there is awareness present right now, is by the awareness itself. There cannot be a recognition of something that has no shape and form by a shape and form. as someone, although that is how it feels at first. So just a little bit of looking and recognizing that you're already having the exact same experience as myself right now. The only difference is that it's just become effortless for attention to rest upon itself. That I somehow forgot in doing this over and over again how to pay attention to a thought, how to pay attention to my mind, which is another object. If there is no ability to contract around your mind, your thoughts, your emotions anymore, then that's a very different experience. And that will just happen accidentally, like it did for me. At some point, something happened in my experience that triggered a lot of emotion, a lot of thoughts, and normally attention would have gone straight to them and they would have been stayed there for several hours. But this time, I don't know what happened in the meantime. I don't know when it fell away, but those thoughts and emotions just arose, and I suddenly couldn't do this anymore. It was just like this. It just stayed effortlessly like that. It wasn't even a choice. So you can recognize your own formlessness already, and just the simple choice to do that consistently, to bring attention back where it is no longer really attention. You can't pay attention to something anymore, only to nothing. Your eyes can still look at the shapes, but as you prove to yourself to start off with, hopefully, you can look at an object, but your awareness is recognizing its own subjectivity at the same time, its own nothingness, its own formlessness. So your eyes can still look around, you can still function, you can still drive your car, but your awareness is not contracting around whatever your eyes are seeing. It's not contracting around whatever your mind is thinking or your body is feeling. It also cannot grab onto peace or love or bliss when it appears. So they don't get pushed away. It's that contraction around things that makes them, trying to hold on to something we want or trying to push away an object that actually causes it all to get kind of screwed up. So I hope you're bursting through these obstacles that your mind will come up with as to why you may not wake up fully. And you're already having the same experience as me right now. The longer that you're doing it, the better it begins to feel. And when you lose your ability to contract around an object, you can no longer suffer again, ever. Whatever that object is, whether it's thoughts or emotions or a negative experience or physical pain or anything in particular, it doesn't matter what is going on in your body, your mind, your world, you'll still be able to respond to them, you'll still be able to act appropriately, but you won't be able to suffer because you won't be able to contract around these objects. So it's just a new habit to build, just to pay attention to that place where attention merges back in, just becomes the formlessness itself. Can you pay attention to nothing? Yes, you can. Can you be aware of something that doesn't have a shape? Yes, you can. Silence, presence, beingness, consciousness, none of them are all the same, just names for the same thing. They don't have any shape or any form. We've just been so used to our attention automatically going to an object, like a thought. As soon as it arises in our awareness, there's just this habit to look at it immediately, to pay attention to it immediately. Any habit can be turned around. It can be turned to the opposite. You can change one habit for another. So I'll open it up for questions. If anybody would like to share or to ask a question, if you click on the participants at the bottom of the screen, and at the bottom of the participants list, there is an option to raise your hand if you'd like to share something or to ask a question. Hopefully you're all feeling the simplicity of this awakening process, that it's much more reachable and available. Okay, Ron.
Hey, Helen, and thanks for the reminder on awareness. Just as this is something that I started doing about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and as with everything else, it seems like, then there's the Vasana course, or there's taking the Bhagavad Gita, or then all you kind of get distracted even by supposed the good stuff as far as this new habit is concerned.
Yeah.
And would it be appropriate for me to mention a book that I found extremely helpful?
Yeah, you can do, yeah.
Sure. There's a book by Locke Kelly called The Way of Effortless Mindfulness.
Uh-huh.
And
I haven't read that one.
It has, it's you would greatly appreciate, and everyone, if they read it, would recognize basically what you said. And Locke has what he calls these glimpse exercises, awareness games, maybe you call it, where throughout the day there's these different little things, depending on what you feel more called to do, to kind of just to stop and to do that. And the whole thought is, in developing a habit, how do you best go about it? If you try to sit there all day long and try not to focus on something, guess what you start doing? You start focusing on something because you're drawn to what you don't want to do. And so I found that very, very helpful. And there's some of the things that I wasn't drawn to, as far as the mini glimpse games, but others that were very, very helpful. And I would assume, I would assume also, though, is there some kind of correlation, if there's still some built up vasana energy that hasn't been released yet, are you able to, does that keep you from really being able to get into this open, this open space, or are they not really directly related?
Are you asking if sometimes, could you just repeat your question? I'm not entirely sure what you're...
Sure. So go to your Vasana mini course.
Uh-huh.
That you have, that it's about identifying things that have some kind of charge to them, and that there's that's actually an energetic charge within the body.
Uh-huh.
And until you can really fully feel the feeling that's behind that, it won't release itself from you. It kind of holds you hostage. So if, for instance, I'm being held hostage by a couple of these Vasana energies, does that detract or detour me from being able to get into this awareness space through these different exercises, or do the two not really, is that they can be done simultaneously and they're just the same, or is it better to clear the Vasana energy first?
It's probably easier just to recognize what you are first, and then if there is some, just recognize that as much as you can. And then if some big emotion comes up, some force of habit in which the attention just involuntarily goes to these thoughts, these emotions, and you can't seem to somehow bring it back at that moment, then that's a good time to begin to question, or to use the contemplation to look at the end, feel the energies that come up. They are really the same thing, because it is it's, let's say, if you're aware of awareness, then you are actually unable to suppress anything in that moment. You're not paying attention to the egoic structure at all in the moment. So it's beginning to open up anyway. So you'll find that stuff comes up as you're watching the awareness, because you're no longer holding this rigid egoic structure together, just literally taking your attention off it, putting it on what's real. It's going to begin to open up. Sometimes we can just keep our attention on what's real, subjectivity, and while the emotion's just kind of doing its thing. Sometimes we might find attention just keeps getting drawn to it. If there's a lot of thoughts around it, a lot of charge around it, as you were saying, at that point, then it's a good idea just sort of look at it and dig into it. Even that is really a function of awareness, which is a seeing and a looking and an investigation rather than trying to do anything about the vasana itself. Trying to see it, to understand it. That understanding just dissolves the vasana itself. Then it's always held in place by one or two false ideas that aren't really true. So as we're putting our attention on what's real, we're not believing these thoughts at the same time. You can't do both at the same time. Believing a thought is really just when we pay a lot of attention to it because it seems very, very true. So if attention's in the real place more and more, you're automatically coming out of this vasana, even if a lot of charge is coming up. In fact, it's coming up because you're no longer suppressing it all. You can get a sense of it, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that I thought of that I would share too is, you'd mentioned you weren't sure exactly kind of when the switch took place, and just all of a sudden the charge was gone. And I've heard Rick Archer talk about this, and who's going to be interviewing you here soon. He talks about that maybe it's similar to phase transitions. Water being probably the easiest one that we understand, is that dealing with Fahrenheit, you're on centigrade, but Fahrenheit
Okay,
at
yeah.
211 degrees. At 211 degrees, the water's not even moving. It's not boiling at all. But at 212, 1 degree more, you've already gone 211 degrees. And it's at 212 that all of a sudden it's turning into steam and it's boiling madly. So it's not like there are many other examples of things not particularly a stair-step progression. It's just all of a sudden you reach a point, it's like, boom, change in that phase.
Yeah, and what's really important to realize is you might not recognize that that's happened until something arises and there's no suffering from it. Nobody was more surprised than I was. And like, oh, that's different. And it wasn't the way that mine said this was going to happen. It's just some very quiet kind of, oh, that's good. This intense emotion raging and no suffering around it, which is very, very nice. And who knows which one of the times of looking at what's real is enough to, it accumulates as you keep on doing it, the power behind it, and the egoic structure falling apart as you're putting attention on what's real. And while you're looking at what's real, it's fallen away somehow. Big piece of it's just fallen off and we don't even notice, This is very different to what most of us are doing, which is looking at the ego going, when is it going to fall apart? Why isn't it falling apart yet? Why is it still here? So
sure.
very
Thank
good.
you so much for your teachings.
Thank you. Sophie?
Oh, hello. Yeah, sorry.
Hiya.
Hi, you just answered my question really, because it was to do with that that kind of subtlety of when you are contemplating. Like just now, I've been questioning, and there's a great intensity of the contracted energy because it's being kind of seen and addressed.
Yeah.
Through the contemplation. So my question really was exactly what you just said, which was, because essentially you're sort of saying, leave it alone, leave the thoughts and the feelings to take care of themselves, and just in that spacious awareness. There's nothing. There's no need to go there in a contracted way. Just let them kind of be. But then when you start to contemplate with questioning, then there's quite a focus again. So it was just
the openness of the question is also going to have a very similar effect to just watching what is real, the recognizing the awareness. in that openness of the question, is this really true? Then you're not able to suppress anything. So whether we're looking at what's real or questioning if it's really what's unreal, it's the same thing. Two different ways of doing the same thing, really. You can't ask, is it really true? Fill in the blank, and be contracting around it at the same time. The question is opening up a space, kind of the exact polar opposite of what we normally do around these thoughts, which is there's this energy comes up, thoughts and emotions around it in this tight knot. And usually our attention upon it is making it worse, even though we don't want to, and it's fueling the next round of this loop that we're going through. But to ask, is it really true? We're opening the attention up again to see how many answers are going to come and what type of answers are going to come to that question. So just the question itself is going to begin to reverse the contraction. It's kind of like getting a crowbar in there and just kind of wedging it open a little bit, you know how tight it gets when it's really sort of contracted and when there's a lot of around it. So you're not going to be able to all we have to do is stop paying attention to what's unreal. How do we actually do that? By paying attention to what's real, or questioning if this thing that's coming up is true. So not automatically believing it and paying attention to it. They're both really the same thing, just I know my own pathways. Ron was just saying there were some things that are just, stay as the awareness, okay, but when this fear comes up, couldn't even find awareness then. It felt like it was just, it must have obviously still been here, but there was just this attention went straight to this like a magnet, So,
yeah,
lovely. Thanks for sharing that. Steve?
Hiya.
Hiya, how you doing?
Not so bad. It'll come out a bit disjointed, I think, so I can't remember.
Okay.
I listened this afternoon. This afternoon or this morning, I listened to you. Transcending the Mind Part 2. And there was so much in it that it was like specifically talking to me. We're having this conversation. You were telling me all this stuff what was going on in my mind at the time. Maybe
I'm in your head, huh? I know what's going on in there.
You're always in my bloody head one way or another. Yeah, sorry for But what happened was, I thought, well, I hadn't heard this before. I hadn't heard it. And then, what's his name? Ian came on, Maggie, and Ian started saying something. I remember, I thought, no, I've heard that before. So I've listened to it before, I've never heard a word. I can't remember much about it now, but I'm going to go back to it again. But you mentioned stuff like, you said something there about a time came when the thing about the self, the silence, whatever you want to call it, is had no ability to grasp hold of a negative or positive thought even. You just had no ability, and I thought, oh, it must be a lovely place to be that.
It is actually, yeah.
Nice one. But not quite there. It's like on a flipping yo-yo. But when you said some other day, I spoke the other day about it, it flips and flops like that. In one way or another, I'm always into some sort of flipping turmoil or another. I go over for a while and then it comes up, it seems to come in another door and it starts up again. We tried the paint there, I kind of suffer from it, and I forget about that sound. Another one. I think you misunderstood when I said I'm going to give up. I meant something like, it's too much information. That's what I meant. Too much information. Settle down and see what's going on. I was going through it last week. And you said something about life being fair, and I looked right into that. It's right back to, as far as I can remember, even as a kid, as a child, first remember it. I don't remember the words, but I was on my own. I was told I was careless. I never felt worth anything, I suppose.
Yeah,
my mum and dad,
early experiences.
yeah, we're never there, but I say it can even go back further than that. It's the anger and fear that were already there when we first memory. That's what I think. They were even, you know, so I can see what you said about you might have caused this somehow. But it's inadequacy. Although I've spoke about it before, I'm hoping I'm seeing it a little bit deeper. I've really deep down think I don't deserve this. I won't get this. It's not going to happen for you, Steve. No.
Yeah, it was the same for me. I you know, I had a relatively good life. You know, everything was on the surface going. You know, the awakening was going fairly well, and then it just hit upon this core of something inside me just really believed it just wasn't good enough. You know, I wasn't safe, I wasn't good enough, and because I wasn't good enough, that meant I was also in danger. You know, it just kind of cycled into each other. You know, and I've got to be better than I am so that I'm safer. You know, it just went around and around. But to see, despite our sort of intellectual conscious thinking, knowing that we're safe, you know, right now I'm safe, I'm sat in my house, nothing is threatening me, but you know, to be able to accept that something inside really doesn't feel worthy of happiness or success is a real breakthrough, because we can intellectualize ourselves out of it most times. Of course that's not right, you know, of course that's not true, but to deeply accept actually some part of me really is really scared or really angry at life, or you know, really not feeling good enough. It's a big breakthrough when you can see it. It's not rational at all. It's not logical. It doesn't fit with our experiences right now, probably, but it is echoes from what we've experienced, you know, perhaps from very early age, or even before that. You know, there's some part of me that is deeply wounded, you know, hurting. And you can begin to heal it. You can begin to recognize that, you know, there's something inside that's kind of ready for a fight or defending itself or waiting for the next, you know, way life is going to slap it around a bit somehow or something, you know. It's good. It'll reveal. You have to kind of really want to see it with an understanding of the fact that it may not be consciously how you're thinking and feeling at all, but there'll be something deep down in there it's more like a frightened child than a rational way of thinking, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's like. Yeah. He talks about triggers and how the trigger sets them off inside me, which is already there. Which on a mental level, I can understand these things. But I'm hoping I'm seeing them a bit open. Maybe I'm open again. Or ego's in here already. But what do I do with them? Is it really true that?
You can look at what's the emotion that comes up and then work it back to the belief, the story behind it.
Not gonna
that's whatever the emotion is signifying what the story is. So fear will be saying I'm not safe, and unworthiness.
Sorry, but they always come back to that. Nearly all of them come back to fear eventually.
Yeah.
So I'm back at that one again. So
yeah.
But not going to make it. Going to be left behind. Going to be left. But that's the big one. Going to be left. Yeah.
But you can question that directly. You know, you can really look at that particular. If that's the story that something inside, not up here, but something deep in the gut is really sort of feeling that way, then you can question that directly. You know, can I be left behind? Is that really true, you know, and
That's
just being
right.
open to all of the answers that want to come to that question. Normally we stop at the thoughts and the emotions, and that's all we accept. You know, just to stay open to all the ways life wants to answer that. To stay with the question until you're no longer experiencing the negative emotions that come from that story. That's how you know that that question is no longer, that story is no longer being believed, not even in your cells, not even in your tissues, you know, right down on a deeper level. No,
Yeah,
and it's not sort of hard
that's more
work.
or less what I've been doing.
Yeah.
I've about 5 questions going on now. Just stay with one, you know what I mean? Anyway, it's settling down a bit. I'm coming through it a bit.
Just keep looking as it reveals itself, this small sort of wounded child inside, as it reveals itself. It's because it's feeling safer to show this stuff to you. These energies are feeling safer, you know, to be able to reveal themselves in the light of your real seeing, you know, a non-judgmental place, just wanting to see what they are. You know, then you'll be able to start to really move. It's quite surprising what's in there. You know, I was a fairly successful woman with a family, you know, happy most of the time. And yet there was some part of me that was just terrified and really feeling totally unworthy, you know, absolutely terrified of everything. Total opposite of what you would think consciously, you know, was going on. So it's good that you're seeing it, because then the defensive layers of the ego are peeling away.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you for sharing. Ian and Maggie?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi,
How you doing?
All right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a bit about, well, I saw your post on one of the groups that you're going to talk about chakras soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if you could kind of talk about some of the energetic shifting that might go on when you start to kind of, the more you practice whatever method of tuning in with dissolving the ego, whichever one floats your boat kind of thing. What kind of energetic shifts can take place when you start to like stay more as, or realize that's what you are and you always have been, that, away from like the egoic self, if you like.
Basically, all the energy that we're using to suppress an emotion and to suppress everything, it begins to get freed up. And that begins to, sometimes that's but we all know the famous examples of where it happens very suddenly, like Ramana, and most of us it's a gentle, gradual, sometimes slightly surprising. Quite a lot of energy can just be liberated very quickly by you asking one question once, or looking at, you know, the phenomenon itself. It's really because it's cost us a tremendous amount of energy. Well, you can imagine, right? If you're the infinite being, you know, that gave birth to the cosmos and sustains it every second.
Yeah.
And you're imagining yourself to be this small, limited being.
Yeah.
How much energy is it going to take to block out everything else except what's happening in one mind and body, like the rest of the universe?
Yeah.
And then you start to sort of not do that, and suddenly this energy can be quite suddenly or quite quickly released. And then after each time, for myself, the shifts got bigger. There was more energy released. It started off quite slowly, and then each time it happened, there was more energy, and it took me longer to get used to the new energy level. And of course, it hits some pockets of resistance along the way, and it begins to work through the chakra system, through the meridians, and then into the body, and then out into your life and into your relationships. And Any resistance it hits along the way, any sort of stubborn beliefs, you will you may feel like you're standing in the middle of a tidal wave coming right at you sometimes, but that's where the beauty of a question really helps. Have you noticed some big surges of energy?
Yeah, since I can't remember when, sometime in the lockdown, since I've met you, I've had a few. Well, initially when I met you was because of a big energy shift, which I didn't know anything about at the time. I don't know if you remember. And there was one, like maybe a couple of years after I'd been with you for a while, and there was another kind of shifting of energy. But there's been something in the while I've been in lockdown and doing taking the opportunity to do quite a lot of digging deep, some beliefs and stuff. Suddenly there was kind of, I mean, I thought pretty much the energy was kind of flowing about everywhere where it should be, kind of thing. But then I realized that suddenly my legs have seemed to just suddenly, it seems to come from like the root chakra area downwards, down my thighs and legs that I've not, and I thought, oh, this is kind of new. And it did initially kind of like freak me out a little bit, because
crown chakra and the root chakra for me were very visceral experiences of them opening. It was literally felt like something was pushing down to the lower half of my body and then down into my legs and literally pushing through resistance. It didn't hurt, it felt like somebody had turned the gravity up for a while, you know, like something was just pulling me down. There was a recognition actually of energy's never really fully flowed through my body ever, and now it's starting to again. Like this whole stream of energy, and we turn the tap right off, and there's just enough to keep the body alive, you know.
Yeah, I realised that I've always tried to be. I always got the impression I was quite a chilled and quite a calm kind of person. And it was just, I realised now it's just really a load of rubbish, because I've just been trying to dampen everything down.
But we're so used to doing that right from day one, and we see all the adults around us doing the same thing. We don't even remember that we're doing that until we stop.
Yeah.
And all this energy comes, and then, whoa, you know.
Yeah, it feels like I've let kind of, what's that expression where you let Pandora's box open a little bit more, and
yeah.
a little bit more comes out? Or the bit about the guitar, if you strike a guitar, another guitar in the same room will vibrate at the same. And most people are just hanging onto the strings, so they can't vibrate, you know. And so my fingers are getting prized off, kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. It's just the opening, isn't it? And as you're more open, everything can resonate as it wants to. And boy, does it resonate sometimes.
Yeah.
You just as you're watching the real self, paying attention to the real self, you're not suppressing this energy shifting and realigning and things that are going on, you know, so you don't need to suffer through it.
Yeah.
It can be quite surprising in its intensity sometimes.
There's
but also your capacity to allow these shifts and just let them happen is also increasing at the same time.
There's normally at some point during the day, because normally I wake up and there's kind of a little bit of resistance to the energy flow or something, you know. And then I don't know what at different points, suddenly during the day, I just kind of relax, and it's so much easier when you don't fight it so much.
Awareness obviously knows when it's lunchtime then.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
relax now.
Yeah, it's not always the same time. It's suddenly somebody kind of gives up and just goes, okay, this is what's happening. So, you know, this is what's happening. So it's kind of cool, you know.
You could try when you wake up tomorrow morning just to ask the question, am I resisting the energy? And see what happens.
Yeah, I'll try that.
I'll remind.
Yeah, thank
Lovely.
you.
Thanks. Okay, Sharon?
Hi,
Hiya, how are you?
I'm good. I had a breakthrough that was interesting and would probably be laughable to some people because, out in this country now, there's several of us that don't like the president,
Hmm.
more than several, I would think. I don't know. But I
I
wanted
think
to
so
know,
too. There might be quite a few.
why I don't like to watch him. And studying the things I've studied, I realize it's always my mind because it's only oneself. So I started to listen and I was crying. I started to feel like I was like 4 or 5 years old, crying outside my great grandmother's house because she had made me leave. My mother was calling me and they were keeping me from her. And there was a little girl there that had peed in her pants. And I just remember now that I felt so evil. And I had pushed that down. And when I was listening to this book, I was feeling that awful feeling that I've been hiding from and this has happened in other retreats, but it's just coming through because I've asked the self, please show me what I'm hiding, please. And when I saw, because I said, oh, he's such a sociopath. And my ex-husband appeared to be, he was very cruel and very much like a sociopath. That's how he appeared in my dream. And I allowed him to mistreat me for many, many years. And, I realized it was on me. So what I want to share with you is that I've got a tremendous amount of presence right now. And a lot of tears are coming through me from gratitude and not as much. There's been a tremendous amount of resistance for me to feel that little girl because she cried so much. That's all I remember. Of course, memory doesn't really matter, but I remember that my sister told me I was always crying. And so, I was thinking, like, look at that. I'm using Donald Trump to help me wake up.
The self works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? It's
out there looking like he's the cruelest man in America, in the world, people are saying. And who are we but the self? So if we see it, we have to look inside because there's got to be a part of us that still thinks we're evil.
And when you ask the question, what have I not wanted to see? What have I been hiding or suppressing? It's going to be some things that we didn't want to see, that we've looked at all the bits that we wanted to see. And then there's a little filing cabinet, and the back drawer in the filing cabinet is do not ever look at this, ever.
Especially if I thought I was like this really sweet person and good person. And then years ago, I opened up A Course in Miracles and I found, oh, that's, what that's about. It's it pretty much gives you a raw view of the ego. But I was afraid to see that evilness, but yet it was always around me. My mother displayed it. My teachers displayed it. So it's lessening. And I just wanted to tell you that I feel a breakthrough and more space.
Good.
And I think
if you look at this kind of stuff as just energies, they're just energies that are being passed in personally, and until we're conscious of them, we've no choice but to play them out. And there doesn't need to be a blame about that for others or ourselves. It's at times when I've been really unfair to people, judgmental, and if we're feeling guilt about that, then we're holding it personally. But if we can look from the self and go, well, this is just some energy that is no longer useful, some tendency that I'd prefer to upgrade now. I'm going to swap it for an upgrade,
It won't hurt me. That's what I was afraid of. I was afraid it was going to hurt me. And it was also hilarious because I had all these thoughts, God, this is the man that's going to maybe run again and he's going to do this and that. And then I stopped and said, what did I ask? I asked to find out what I'm seeing. And I had this image right before me where I felt this evil, a little girl thinking she's evil when she's just innocent.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Good. It's like with Steve, if we're seeing these energies deep down, there's obviously something opening up that's no longer wanting to hide or protect, so much. So it's really, really good to break through to this. So part of what we were saying the other week, making peace with your humanity, huh?
Yeah, that's what we spoke about. And the ego, was saying to me, well, why would you get that book if you want to wake up? I mean, that's ridiculous. You want to just make fun of him? And the ego has said to me a couple times, said, you know, you're never going to wake up. Well, I already know that I'm waking up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. I think that's true for all of us.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
you know, I've never seen anybody more determined to wake people up than you.
I'm pretty passionate, I think. Yeah. Pretty
Yes.
driven. Yeah.
I love you for it. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you for sharing that. Diane?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Hi, how are you?
Good. Good. Very good. Thank you. Well, I had a similar thing I was thinking of earlier, and Sharon kind of brought that forward, and I appreciate it because there are just certain energies that come up around, especially lately in in political issues, and not issues, but just I'm not an intellectual based being. You know, that's not my main way of interacting. I'm much more intuitive. So when there are situations that come up that when arguments come my direction, I have a lot of intimidation that comes up. I don't have an argument back because there's not an argument. There's just some kind of feeling like I should feel defensive. You know, just feel defensive.
Yeah.
And intimidated. But there's nothing, it's not a real thing that I'm feeling defensive about. It's just, I don't know exactly, but I do appreciate Sharon kind of bringing that about, and maybe something I can.
It's good to recognize these things, isn't it? It's I recognize within myself at some point that I really don't like arguments, you know, and firstly because I'm not that quick-witted. You know, if somebody makes this snappy remark, it's about 5 minutes later before I can say something witty in response. And so I was always shied away from it, but also any sense of conflict, and I'm kind of, you know, I really looked at that inside, and I recognized, you know, yes, I don't really need to defend myself, as you were saying, but also, you know, it's all right if it's all right to prefer peace, isn't it, than conflict. You know, it's okay to be more attuned to that, and you might always have an aversion to sort of somebody who's really wanting to have a go, you know, sort of a that kind of person coming at us. It doesn't have to be causing suffering inside, does it? It can be just actually, I prefer just to be quiet and peaceful inside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really good that you're seeing these things. It seems to be a day for deep exploration inside ourselves. Seems to be the theme of today.
And there's something else I wanted to share. You know, it's no secret to me that I've had major shifts over the last whatever period of time. I don't know. And sometimes I feel like I want to share more. I feel like, in a sense, that I'm not being true to myself because I don't. The words that come out aren't really representative of what I'm trying to say a lot of times. This seems to be working though.
Really
at this moment.
Yeah, it really is working, isn't it, right now?
And so I notice sometimes I have 4 children. My youngest is 20, so they're not little ones. But when I do things like I mean, I don't, when I pray or send good energies or wish healing or those kinds of things, I rarely like include my own children in that. And I thought maybe there was a thought like, you should do that, you know. But then there's like I already know 100% that they're cared for. I don't feel there's any missing piece there.
Yeah.
And but we don't like talk deeply or share spiritual things at all. It's just I live with 3 of them, so we're in the same environment. But my 22-year-old did. He called me the other day on his way home from work, and he was like, "Mom, I want to talk when I get home." And he's just walking home from the pizza place where he works down the street. And he's had some different challenges in figuring out life. And so I was like, oh boy, I'm a good one to ask. I don't know. So we sat down when he came home, and, you know, he was like, I just, you know, I've tried this, that, the other thing. I'm not really sure what I should do. And I just told him, just relax and trust that life has a way for you. You know, every guidance counselor will give you a path that you're supposed to take. And at 22, you already see that maybe that's not quite, doesn't go the way they tell you it's going to go. So I said, I'm sorry I don't have any more kind of solid information, but just know and trust that as soon as you step, life will already be there.
Yeah.
For you to land on it. And
I think there's such a thing as well these days, isn't it, that we're supposed to know what we want to do with our lives. And I had, like, even at 40 years old, you know, no idea what I wanted to do. I still didn't. It kind of found me, you know, as I woke up more. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. But you know, when I used to go to school and then college and then university, and they were, what do you want to do when you leave here? And I was like, I don't know. You know, even at 30, 35, I just no idea. And it's okay, isn't it? It's absolutely, we're not supposed to have it all figured out. And even if we do, it doesn't go that way, does it? It goes the other way sometimes.
But the real gem in that moment was when he looked at me and said, "Thanks, Mom."
Wonderful.
You know? And
Wonderful.
I felt really like I don't have to do anything different than what I'm doing and everything. I mean, I just need to follow my own advice.
You already are enough, and
So
other people can see it, you know,
just
like
do
your
what
son.
I'm doing.
Yeah. But we're always the last one to follow our own advice, though, aren't we? Yeah. Lovely. Oh, wonderful. I'm glad you were able to help him.
So,
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. Okay. We will leave it there for today. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.
Love you, Helen.